The massive warship blocked out the sun as it descended through Earth's atmosphere. Commander Zarak stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship, his forearms crossed behind his back. The conquest of this primitive world would be simple. Earth's military forces had already fallen back from every major city. Their crude projectile weapons bounced harmlessly off the Empire's energy shields. Pathetic, Zarak muttered, watching the blue-green planet grow larger on the view screen. These humans don't even have plasma weapons. They still use chemical explosives. His lieutenant, a tall reptilian creature with scales that shimmered purple, nodded in agreement. The scouts report minimal resistance, Commander. The humans have retreated to their mountains and forests. They know they cannot face us directly. Zarak's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. The Galactic Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds, and Earth would be no different. The humans' primitive technology was centuries behind even the Empire's most basic equipment. Their soldiers still wore fabric uniforms instead of powered armor. They communicated with radio waves instead of quantum entanglement. Most amusing of all, they still relied on kinetic weapons that required line of sight to hit their targets. The first Imperial dropships landed in New York's Central Park, disgorging hundreds of shock troops. Each soldier stood 8 feet tall, encased in armor that could withstand a direct hit from a human tank. They marched through the empty streets in perfect formation, their plasma rifles glowing with deadly energy. High above the city, on the roof of an abandoned office building, Maria Rodriguez lay perfectly still. The 50-year-old former Marine had been in position for 12 hours, her rifle barrel extending just inches past the edge of the roof. Through her scope, she watched the alien soldiers moving through Times Square. Her breathing was slow and controlled, her heartbeat steady. Maria had been a sniper instructor at Quantico when the aliens arrived. Now she was part of Earth's last line of defense, not regular military, but hunters, sport shooters, and veterans who understood something the aliens didn't. Humans had been perfecting the art of long-range precision shooting for centuries. It was more than technology. It was patience, mathematics, and an almost supernatural ability to account for wind, gravity, and distance. She watched the alien commander emerge from a transport vehicle. Even through the shimmer of his personal shield, she could see his arrogance in the way he walked. The aliens trusted their technology completely. They had never faced an enemy who could put a bullet through a target at 2,000 meters. Maria made tiny adjustments to her scope, accounting for the light breeze coming from the east. The aliens' shields were designed to stop high-energy weapons and fast-moving projectiles. But Maria wasn't using a standard military rifle. Her weapon was a custom-built, 408 SHY-TAC, loaded with specially designed rounds that moved just below the speed threshold that triggered the shields. She squeezed the trigger between heartbeats. The commander's head snapped back, purple blood spraying across the pavement. For a moment, the alien soldiers stood frozen, unable to comprehend what had happened. Their commander lay dead on the ground, killed by a weapon they couldn't detect. From a distance their scanners said was impossible. Panic spread through the alien ranks. They raised their shields and scanned frantically for the shooter. But Maria was already gone. Crawling back through the ventilation system she'd used to access the roof, by the time the aliens reached her position, she was 3 blocks away, blending in with other survivors in an underground shelter. The news of the commander's death spread quickly through the resistance network. For the first time since the invasion began, humans had scored a real victory. More importantly, they had found a weakness in the seemingly invincible alien technology. In Montana, Jim Harrison received the coded message on his ham radio. The 72-year-old rancher had been a sniper in Vietnam, and though his hands weren't as steady as they used to be, his mind was still sharp. He gathered his group of local hunters and militiamen in his barn. "The shields have a weakness," he explained, spreading out maps on a wooden table. "They're calibrated for energy weapons and high-velocity rounds. But if we slow our bullets down just enough, they pass right through." The younger men looked skeptical. Jake Morrison, a hunting guide in his 30s, spoke up. "How do we slow down a bullet without making it useless?" Jim smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. "Same way we've always done it, son. Heavier bullets, Less powder, longer barrels. We're not trying to punch through armor. We're trying to slide past their defenses. One shot, one kill, then disappear. That's how we've always hunted. Now we're just hunting different prey. Across the planet, similar groups were forming. In the Australian outback, Aboriginal hunters who could track prey across miles of desert prepared their rifles. In the Swiss Alps, competition shooters who could hit targets in howling mountain winds checked their equipment. In Finland, where shooting was a national pastime, thousands of marksmen prepared for war. The aliens had made a critical error. They had studied Earth's military capabilities but ignored its civilian population. They didn't understand that on this planet, millions of ordinary people owned precision rifles and spent their weekends practicing shots that would be impossible on most worlds. They didn't know about hunting cultures that had been refined over generations, or shooting sports that demanded perfection. Lieutenant Thax was leading a patrol through the ruins of Denver when the first shot came. The plasma gunner to his left simply collapsed, a small hole in his helmet leaking orange blood. Before Thax could react, another soldier fell, then another. The shots came from different directions, different distances. His squad's sensors showed nothing. No energy signatures, no targeting lasers, no heat blooms from advanced weapons. "Fall back," Thax screamed into his communicator. "We're under attack." But there was nowhere to fall back to. The humans were invisible, striking from positions the aliens couldn't even imagine. A shot from a highway overpass 2 kilometers away. Another from a water tower that should have been far outside. Effective range. The aliens' advanced sensors, designed to detect threats from other spacefaring civilizations, were useless against humans who had learned to hide from each other for thousands of years. In orbit, Commander Zarak watched the casualty reports with growing alarm. In 3 days, the Empire had lost more soldiers to these primitive attacks than in their last 5 conquests combined. Every patrol that ventured outside the secured zones lost troops to invisible enemies. Supply convoys were being decimated by shooters who struck and vanished before the aliens could respond. "How?" he demanded, slamming a fist on his command console. "How are they doing this? Their weapons are primitive. Their technology is ancient." His new lieutenant, promoted after the previous one was killed by a shot through his office window from 3 kilometers away, struggled to explain. They don't fight like other species, Commander. They don't seek glory in battle. They hide and wait, sometimes for days, for the perfect shot. Our shields, our armor, our sensors, none of it was designed for this kind of warfare. Zarak turned to the view screen showing Earth below. He had conquered worlds where the natives fought with plasma cannons and antimatter bombs. He had defeated civilizations that commanded fleets of warships, but he had never faced an enemy like this, one that turned patience into a weapon, that made distance their ally, that struck from shadows and melted away like ghosts. In a forest outside Seattle, Sarah Chen adjusted her ghillie suit and settled in for another long wait. The 25-year-old competitive shooter had already taken down 4 alien officers in the past week. She knew the aliens would eventually adapt, would find ways to counter human snipers. But for now, Earth's defenders had found their advantage. The aliens had overlooked something fundamental about humanity. They saw the primitive weapons and assumed Earth would be an easy conquest. They didn't understand that humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing from a distance. They didn't know about the patience of hunters who could wait motionless for hours, the precision of Olympic shooters who could hit a target the size of a coin from hundreds of meters away, or the cunning of soldiers who had learned to use terrain and weather as weapons. Sarah spotted movement through her scope. An alien patrol moving through the trees below her position. She had mapped this area for days, knew every sight line, every escape route. The aliens moved in their standard formation, trusting their technology to protect them. She began the breathing exercise her grandfather had taught her, the same one he'd learned as a sniper in Korea. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow the heart rate. Become one with the rifle. The patrol leader stepped into a small clearing, exactly where Sarah knew he would. She had studied their movement patterns, learned their habits. The shot was already calculated. Distance, wind, elevation, even the rotation of the Earth. She squeezed the trigger with the same gentle pressure she'd used to hold a butterfly. The rifle barely moved as it fired, the custom suppressor reducing the sound to a whisper. 2 seconds later, the patrol leader crumpled to the ground. By the time the aliens realized what had happened and began their frantic search, Sarah was already moving to her next position. She would strike again tomorrow. From a different location, at a different time. This was how Earth would fight. Not with advanced technology or overwhelming force, but with the skills humans had honed over millennia. The Galactic Empire had expected to fight Earth's armies. Instead, they found themselves facing an entire planet of hunters, and the hunt had only just begun. Commander Zarak stared at the holographic map floating above his command table. Red dots marked where Imperial soldiers had fallen to human snipers. There were thousands of them, scattered across every continent. 6 weeks into the occupation, and the Empire controlled less territory than on the first day of the invasion. "Activate Protocol 7, he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of frustration. "Full sensor sweeps every 30 seconds. Deploy the automated defense turrets. I want overlapping fields of fire around every position." The Empire's response was swift and brutal. Defensive turrets materialized around alien bases, their sensors scanning for any movement within 5 kilometers. Drone swarms filled the skies, equipped with thermal imaging that could detect a human heartbeat from orbit. The aliens believed technology would solve their sniper problem. In the Rocky Mountains, Marcus Thompson watched the changes through his spotting scope. The 68-year-old African-American veteran had served 3 tours as a Marine Scout sniper. Now he led a group of 12 shooters, ranging from teenage hunting enthusiasts to elderly competition shooters. "They're learning," he told his team during their evening briefing in an abandoned mineshaft. "But they're learning the wrong lessons." Amy Lou, a former Olympic biathlete, cleaned her rifle as she listened. "What do you mean?" Marcus pulled out a worn notebook filled with observations. "They think this is about technology. Better sensors, faster reaction times, more coverage. But sniping isn't about equipment. It's about understanding your enemy better than they understand themselves." He was right. The aliens had studied human military doctrine but missed something crucial. Earth snipers weren't following any military handbook. They were drawing on thousands of years of hunting tradition, from persistence hunting on the African savanna to Arctic seal hunters waiting at breathing holes for days. The next morning, Marcus demonstrated his point. The alien base below their mountain position bristled with new defenses. Sensor towers swept the area constantly. Automated turrets tracked every bird that flew overhead. It looked impregnable. Marcus had spent 3 days watching the base, not through a scope but through binoculars, studying patterns invisible to the aliens' AI. He noticed that the sensor sweeps, while constant, had a rhythm. The turrets, programmed for efficiency, favored certain tracking patterns. Most importantly, the aliens themselves had routines they didn't even realize. Every morning at 0700, they changed the guard shift, he explained to Amy as they lay hidden beneath thermal blankets that masked their heat signatures. The night commander walks from the command center to the barracks. Takes him 45 seconds. For exactly 3 seconds, he passes through a blind spot where 2 sensor fields don't quite overlap. Amy watched through her scope, seeing nothing but empty ground. Then, exactly as Marcus predicted, the alien commander appeared. Walking the same path his predecessors had walked for weeks. "Wind is 2 clicks from the west," Marcus whispered. "Range is 2,847 meters. You'll need to lead him by." "I know," Amy said softly. She had already done the calculations, her mind processing variables with the same intensity she'd once used to ski and shoot in the Olympics. The difference was that missing a biathlon target cost you time. Missing here cost lives. The shot was perfect. The commander fell mid-stride, his body tumbling into the blind spot where the recovery team would have to expose themselves to retrieve him. Amy and Marcus were already packing up, knowing they had minutes before the aliens responded. They vanished into the mountain tunnels that honeycomb the Rockies, passages used by miners for over a century. The aliens' sensors could penetrate rock to a certain depth, but the mountains were full of metal deposits that confused their readings. Humans had been hiding in these mountains since before recorded history. Now they did it again, with rifles instead of spears. Across the Pacific, the situation was even worse for the Empire. In the vast forests of Siberia, Russian hunters who had stalked bears and tigers turned their skills against the invaders. They didn't just shoot from concealment. They used the land itself as a weapon. Dmitry Volkov had hunted in these forests for 40 years. He knew how sound carried differently in summer and winter, how thermal layers in the air could bend light and confuse sensors. Most importantly, he understood patience in a way the aliens never could. Dmitry spent 2 weeks preparing a single shot. He studied weather patterns, waiting for the perfect conditions. He dug false hides to confuse the aliens when they searched for him. He even used old hunting tricks, leaving false heat signatures with chemical warming packs to draw drone attention away from his real position. When the conditions were finally right, a temperature inversion that would trap sound, fog that would scatter laser sensors, and wind patterns that would disperse the heat signature of his shot, Dmitry acted. He eliminated an entire alien command staff in 90 seconds, 12 shots from 12 different positions. The aliens found his rifle at the first position, still warm, with a note written in English. "The forest has 1,000 eyes." By the time they realized he had used a system of mirrors and remote triggers to fire from multiple pre-sighted positions, Dmitry was 50 kilometers away, teaching younger hunters the technique. The psychological impact on the aliens was devastating. They had conquered civilizations that fought with black hole generators and quantum weapons. But those enemies fought comprehensible battles. They attacked and defended, advanced and retreated. Humans just waited, and killed, and disappeared. In the Imperial flagship's medical bay, Dr. Cree examined another victim. The insectoid physician had seen deaths from every weapon known to the galaxy, but human sniper kills disturbed her in ways she couldn't explain. "Single projectile," she reported to Commander Zarak. "No energy signature. No technological enhancement, just a simple piece of metal, shaped and propelled with chemical explosives." She paused, her compound eyes focusing on the commander. "They kill us with the same weapons their ancestors used centuries ago. How is this possible?" Zarak had no answer. Every solution created new problems. When they hardened their bases, humans attacked supply convoys. When they protected the convoys, humans targeted communication relays. When they shielded everything, humans simply waited longer, shot from further away, found new angles of attack. The breaking point came in Australia. The Empire had established a major base in the outback, believing the flat, open terrain would make sniper attacks impossible. They didn't understand that Aboriginal Australians had been hunting in this empty land for 50,000 years. Charlie Naparula was part of that ancient tradition. His people had passed down knowledge through countless generations. How to read the land. How to move without disturbing a single pebble. How to wait with the patience of stone. Now he combined that wisdom with modern technology. Charlie didn't just shoot aliens. He taught them fear. He would wound patrol members, not kill them, forcing their comrades to attempt rescue. He would disable vehicles kilometers from base, leaving soldiers to walk back under the burning sun, never knowing when the next shot would come. He used the land's natural acoustics to make his shots seem to come from multiple directions. The aliens tried everything. They sent hunter-killer teams after him. Charlie led them into box canyons, where the heat made their equipment malfunction. They used satellite surveillance. Charlie had mapped every cave and overhang that blocked orbital sensors. They even tried bribing local humans for information, not understanding that Charlie's people had been keeping secrets from outsiders since before the pyramids were built. After 2 weeks of losses, the Outback base was abandoned. The mighty Galactic Empire, which had never retreated from any world, pulled back from a patch of worthless desert because one man with a rifle made it too costly to hold. The effect rippled across Earth. Humans who had been hiding in refugee camps began to realize that the invaders weren't invincible. They were just people. Different people. With better technology. But still capable of fear. Still vulnerable to a well-placed shot from an invisible enemy. In the abandoned suburbs of London, Elizabeth Hawthorne established a sniper school. The 70-year-old had been Britain's premier long-range shooting instructor, training police and military marksmen for decades. Now she taught civilians, accountants, teachers, store clerks. The art of precision shooting. The aliens think in terms of energy output and shield frequencies, she explained to a class of 30 students hidden in an old subway station. We think in terms of wind and patience. They measure success in territory taken. We measure it in fear created. 445. 44444. 444. 44444. Her students learned more than marksmanship. They learned fieldcraft from gamekeepers who could get within touching distance of a deer. They learned camouflage from wildlife photographers who spent months hiding from their subjects. They learned patience from fishermen who understood that sometimes the key to success was simply outlasting your prey. The Empire tried adapting their shields to stop slower projectiles. Human ammunition makers, many working in hidden workshops, simply adjusted their loads. It became a chess game, played with bullets and mathematics, each side adjusting tactics in an endless dance of death. Commander Zarak's reports to the Galactic Council grew increasingly desperate. He requested reinforcements, better equipment, new strategies. The Council's response was always the same. Earth was a primitive world. Its conquest should be simple. Perhaps Zarak was simply incompetent. They didn't understand what Zarak was beginning to grasp. The humans weren't fighting a war. They were hunting, and they had been preparing for this hunt since the first human picked up a rock and calculated the arc needed to bring down prey. In Japan, Master Archer Takashi Yamamoto had adapted the principles of Kyudo, the way of the bow, to modern sniping. His students learned to make their minds as clear as still water, to release their shots between heartbeats with perfect spiritual calm. The aliens' stress sensors, designed to detect the adrenaline spike of impending attack, found nothing. The shots came from humans in states of meditation so deep they barely registered as conscious beings. The Empire's automated systems, programmed to detect aggression and hostile intent, literally couldn't see attacks that came from a place of profound inner peace. It was a form of warfare their civilization had never encountered. Violence without anger, killing without hatred, perfect shots fired with the same tranquility as a tea ceremony. On every continent, in every environment, humans found ways to turn the aliens' advantages against them. In the Amazon, indigenous hunters who could track jaguars through dense jungle picked off alien patrols one by one. In the Arctic, Inuit marksmen used whiteout conditions that blinded alien sensors but not human eyes trained by generations of survival. The war had become something the Galactic Empire had never faced, not a conflict between technologies, but between philosophies. The aliens believed in overwhelming force and technological superiority. Humans believed in patience, precision, and the perfect shot. As Commander Zarak stood on his bridge, watching another patrol's distress beacon activate, he realized a terrible truth. The Empire could glass the planet from orbit, could destroy every city, and burn every forest. But as long as a single human survived with a rifle and the knowledge passed down through generations, the killing would continue. They had overlooked Earth's snipers because they didn't understand what snipers represented. Not just soldiers with long-range weapons, but the culmination of humanity's longest and most defining skill. The ability to hunt, to wait, to strike from the shadows with lethal precision. The hunter had become the hunted, and Earth itself had become humanity's blind. Admiral Vex of the Galactic Council stood before the assembled fleet commanders, his crystalline form refracting light into 1,000 colors. The emergency session had been called after Commander Zarak's latest report from Earth. What should have been a routine conquest had become the Empire's bloodiest campaign in a millennium. 6 months, Vex said, his harmonic voice carrying across the chamber. 6 months to conquer a single primitive world. Explain this failure. Commander Zarak appeared as a hologram, his once proud bearing now hunched with exhaustion. Admiral, with respect, Earth is not primitive. Their weapons may be simple, but their application is unprecedented. We've lost 40,000 soldiers to their snipers. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The Empire had conquered worlds defended by armies of millions without losing half that number. Impossible, another commander interjected. Projectile weapons cannot. Cannot what? Zarak interrupted. Something no subordinate had ever dared do before. Cannot kill from 4 kilometers away? Cannot pierce our shields when fired at precisely calculated velocities? Cannot be wielded by millions of civilians who treat long-range shooting as a recreational activity? On Earth, the resistance had evolved far beyond individual snipers. Maria Rodriguez, the Marine who had fired one of the first successful shots, now coordinated a network spanning the Americas. Hidden in an underground bunker that had once been a Cold War missile silo, she studied reports from thousands of sniper teams. The aliens are pulling back to fortified positions, she told her command staff through encrypted radio. They're abandoning the countryside, concentrating in cities where buildings limit shooting angles. Jim Harrison, joining the meeting via satellite phone from Montana, chuckled. Let them huddle together. Makes planning easier. Maria had been developing something the aliens couldn't anticipate. Synchronized attacks. Not the military kind with orders and hierarchies, but something organic, almost instinctive. Hunters who had never met coordinated through coded messages, timing their shots to create maximum psychological impact. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. At exactly noon, local time, on the same day, snipers around the world would fire simultaneously. Not random shots, but precisely targeted strikes against alien communication nodes, officers, and technical specialists. The aliens would face the reality that Earth itself had risen against them. In Berlin, Franz Mueller had spent weeks infiltrating the city's abandoned districts. The former competitive shooter had mapped every potential firing position within 3 kilometers of the alien headquarters. He wasn't alone. 17 other marksmen had done the same, creating overlapping fields of fire that covered every entrance and window. The aliens had learned to fear open spaces, but they still didn't understand urban sniping. They thought in terms of straight lines and direct threats. Franz thought in terms of ricochets, shooting through multiple windows, using mirrors to fire around corners. Urban combat wasn't about distance. It was about angles and timing. As the synchronized strike approached, something unexpected happened. Civilians who weren't snipers began supporting the effort. In Tokyo, office workers used laser pointers to paint false targets, drawing alien attention away from real shooter positions. In Mumbai, children flew kites with reflective streamers that confused alien sensors. The entire human population had become a support network for their hidden warriors. Commander Zarak felt the trap closing but couldn't see its shape. His forces were secure, protected by layers of shields and automated defenses. He had requested and received the Empire's most advanced prediction algorithms, AI systems that could calculate probability across millions of variables. But the algorithms had been trained on data from civilized warfare. They couldn't account for a grandmother in Sicily who had been noting alien patrol patterns while pretending to tend her garden. They couldn't predict that a teenager in Kenya would use his gaming skills to create false heat signatures with remote-controlled drones. They couldn't understand a form of resistance that had no leaders, no structure, no commands, just millions of humans united by a single purpose. The strike began in New Zealand, where the international dateline made it the first to reach noon. 16 alien officers fell in 2 seconds, shot from positions that shouldn't have existed. Inside water towers, through sewer grates, from boats that had been anchored in place for days. To eliminate motion, the wave swept westward with the sun. Australia, then Indonesia, China, India, each region striking as their clocks hit 12. By the time the aliens realized what was happening, it was too late to warn their forces in Europe and Africa. In Moscow, Natasha Petrova had waited in an abandoned apartment for 9 days, living on cold rations, never moving from her position overlooking Red Square. The aliens had turned the historic square into a landing pad for their shuttles. They believed the open space made them safe. Natasha had calculated something they missed. At exactly noon, the sun would reflect off the golden domes of St. Basil's Cathedral, at just the right angle to blind their sensors for 1.3 seconds. She had one shot at the shuttle pilot as he performed his pre-flight check. The rifle had been her grandfather's, carried through the Battle of Stalingrad. The scope was modern, but the weapon itself was a piece of history, maintained with loving care for 80 years. As the clock struck 12, as snipers across Moscow opened fire, Natasha squeezed the trigger with the same steady hand her grandfather had used to defend this same city. The shuttle crashed into the Kremlin wall, its pilot dead before he could activate emergency systems. Across the city, similar scenes played out. Transport ships fell from the sky, communication towers went silent, command posts became death traps. The psychological effect shattered the Empire's forces. They had conquered worlds where enemies fought with weapons that could crack moons. But those enemies fought understandable battles. This was different. This was personal. Every shot was aimed by a human who had calculated wind and distance, who had waited with inhuman patience, who killed without malice or mercy. Admiral Vex watched the casualty reports in stunned silence. In 6 hours, the Empire had lost more officers and technical personnel than in the previous 6 months. Worse, the losses weren't random. The humans had identified and eliminated specific targets: communication specialists, shuttle pilots, shield technicians. They had crippled the Empire's ability to function as a coordinated force. How? Vex demanded. How do they know who to target? The answer came from an unexpected source. A captured human, a former intelligence analyst named David Kim, had been brought aboard for interrogation. He sat calmly in the containment field, showing none of the fear the aliens expected. "You want to know how we knew who to shoot?" David asked, his voice steady. "We watched you. For months, we watched. Every sniper is a student of their prey. We learned your ranks from how you walked. We identified specialists by the equipment they checked. We mapped your entire command structure without hacking a single computer." He leaned forward, his eyes meeting Vex's crystalline gaze. "Your empire conquers through technology and overwhelming force. But you've never faced hunters before. Real hunters. We've been studying prey behavior since before we discovered fire. Your technology means nothing if we can predict where you'll be and when you'll be there." The full scope of humanity's response was becoming clear. This wasn't military resistance. It was predation on a planetary scale. Every human with a rifle and the skill to use it had become a predator, and the aliens were prey in an environment they didn't understand. In the Amazon rainforest, Kayapo warriors had been teaching alien hunting techniques to anyone who would learn. They showed how to read disturbed vegetation from a kilometer away, how to use the jungle's natural acoustics to mask the sound of a shot, how to strike and vanish like the jaguar. One story spread through the resistance like wildfire. A young Kayapo hunter named Raoni had eliminated an entire alien patrol without firing a shot. He had simply wounded their point man from extreme range, then picked off each soldier who tried to help. The survivors, driven to panic by an enemy they couldn't see or detect, had fired wildly at shadows until their weapons overheated and failed. Raoni then eliminated them with careful shots, one by one, teaching the aliens the terror their technology had inflicted on others. The Empire tried one last desperate measure. They deployed their ultimate tracking system, quantum sensors that could detect the displacement of individual atoms. Surely this would reveal the hidden snipers. In response, an old physicist in Switzerland, working with hunters who understood concealment at a primal level, developed a simple solution. They created quantum ghillie suits, not through advanced technology, but by incorporating materials that naturally scattered quantum readings. Certain minerals, specific plant fibers, even treated mud, could confuse sensors designed to track high-tech threats. The aliens found themselves in an arms race they couldn't win. Every technological solution was countered by human ingenuity and centuries of accumulated hunting knowledge. Worse, the humans were learning from each engagement, sharing information through networks the aliens couldn't crack because they were based on hunting calls, folk songs, and cultural codes that required human context to understand. Commander Zarak made a final attempt to salvage the situation. He ordered his forces to withdraw to orbital platforms, planning to conduct the war from space where human rifles couldn't reach. But as his shuttle lifted off from the Denver Command Center, Sarah Chen watched through her scope from a mountain 20 kilometers away. She wasn't aiming at the shuttle. She was aiming at a very specific component: the external quantum communication array that would transmit Zarak's withdrawal orders to the fleet. The shot was impossible by any rational calculation. 20 kilometers, through multiple atmospheric layers, at a target moving at increasing velocity. But Sarah had spent 3 months preparing for this moment. She had studied weather patterns, calculated the exact atmospheric conditions, even accounted for the Coriolis effect at this precise latitude. Her rifle, custom-built by a master gunsmith in Japan, was capable of only 3 such shots before the barrel wore out. She had saved all 3 for this moment. The first shot missed by centimeters, the wind shifting unexpectedly. Sarah adjusted without conscious thought, her mind processing variables faster than any computer. The second shot struck home, shattering the delicate array. Without it, Zarak's shuttle was cut off from the fleet, unable to coordinate the withdrawal. The third shot she saved. As the shuttle faltered, trying to return to base, she put a round through the cockpit view screen. Not to kill, but to send a message. The shuttle crashed in the foothills, Zarak surviving but stranded on a world where every human with a rifle was waiting for him. Admiral Vex faced the Galactic Council with news that would reshape the Empire's future. Earth cannot be conquered through conventional means, he reported. Their entire population has been training for this war for generations without knowing it. Every hunter, every sports shooter, every military veteran represents a threat we cannot counter. Our choice is simple: glass the planet from orbit and destroy a potential ally, or withdraw and seek peaceful relations. The debate raged for days, but the outcome was inevitable. The Empire had built its reputation on easy conquests. The cost of taking Earth, even if they eventually succeeded, would encourage rebellion on 100 other worlds. If humans could resist with primitive weapons, what would happen when civilizations with actual technology followed their example? The withdrawal began quietly. Alien forces pulled back to defensive positions, then to their ships. They maintained the fiction of a negotiated settlement. But everyone knew the truth. Earth had won not through superior technology or greater numbers, but through the patient application of skills inherited from their ancestors. Maria Rodriguez stood on a hill overlooking the abandoned alien base in New Mexico. Around her, dozens of snipers had gathered, men and women who had never met but had fought together in the most personal war humanity had ever faced. "Think they'll come back?" someone asked. Maria smiled, checking her rifle one more time. "Maybe. But if they do, we'll be waiting. We've always been waiting." As the alien ships disappeared into the sky, children around the world were already learning the lessons of the war. Not just marksmanship, but patience, observation, and the deep understanding that humans were never prey. They were hunters, had always been hunters, and would always be hunters. The Galactic Empire had made many mistakes in their invasion of Earth. They had underestimated human technology, human courage, and human adaptability. But their greatest mistake was forgetting that before humans built cities or flew to the stars, before they split the atom or decoded the genome, they had learned the most fundamental skill of all. They had learned to hunt, and when threatened, 8 billion hunters had answered the call. In the official imperial records, Earth was listed as diplomatically protected, approach with extreme caution. But in the whispered conversations between soldiers who had survived the deployment, it was known by a different name. They called it the Hunter's World, and warned that on Earth, everyone was a sniper, and every sniper was waiting for the perfect shot.